Evelyn arranged her notebooks in neat piles, second grade separate from third grade, tests separate from homework. The staff room was quiet, except for Mrs. Gray dozing over her notes in the far corner. Outside the window, October painted the trees red and gold as the sun began to set. The phone on the table buzzed quietly, a message from Nathan. "I'll be late from the construction site. Don't wait up for dinner." Evelyn put her phone in her bag and closed the desk drawer. He used to call her, tell her about the construction site, ask how her day was going. Now it was mostly short messages, dry and businesslike. The house smelled of cinnamon and apples. Evelyn had put the pie dough in the oven during her lunch break. She loved these quiet hours when she could take her time getting changed, make tea, and check her notebooks. The small, cozy house held traces of their life together, photos on the walls, a collection of magnets on the refrigerator from places they had visited together, an old rocking chair bought at a garage sale. Nathan often teased her about her love of order, but it was this trait that helped her cope with 36 second graders. They respected her for her calmness and consistency, no leniency but no unfair punishments either. Evelyn took the pie out of the oven and set it aside to cool. She sat down at the table to check the notebooks. Jimmy's handwriting was getting sloppier. She would have to talk to his mother. Her favorite TV show was on. They used to watch it together on Tuesdays. But lately, Nathan had been skipping their little tradition more and more often. He came home at the beginning of the 11th. In the past, if he was late, he would always bring something for tea, or at least her favorite latte from the coffee shop on the corner. Now he just went straight to the shower, muttering his usual, "tired as a dog." In the bedroom, Evelyn could hear him talking on the phone. A muffled voice, quiet laughter. Work issues used to be dealt with by 9 in the evening. That was his rule. "Don't bother people after work," he used to say. Now the phone rang at all hours. Nathan lay down next to her, turning his back to her. He smelled of fresh cologne, not the one she had given him for his birthday. He muttered, "Good night." The phone on the nightstand flashed with a new message. Evelyn didn't ask how his day had been. He would just say something general about work, construction, deadlines. He used to tell funny stories about his co-workers, share his plans for new projects, ask her opinion. Now he was more likely to remain silent or respond with general phrases. An untouched apple pie was cooling in the kitchen. Tomorrow she would take it to the teacher's lounge. Her colleagues always enjoyed her baking. And in the evening she would wait again, listening for footsteps on the porch. And maybe Nathan would remember that on Wednesdays they usually had dinner at her parents' house, a tradition he himself had suggested 5 years ago. Leaves rustled outside the window. The October wind was playing hide and seek with the moon. Evelyn closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. She thought about her to-do list for tomorrow. Check the third grade tests, call Jimmy's mom, buy new chalk for the blackboard. The usual worries, the usual thoughts. Only deep down, something new and unfamiliar was stirring. A vague uneasiness that she didn't want to name yet. Haley Burke first appeared at their house on Wednesday, the day of family dinners at Evelyn's parents' house. Nathan suddenly called and said he couldn't make it today because he had to meet with a real estate agent about a new project. "Let her come over, I'm home anyway," Evelyn suggested, not wanting to miss the traditional dinner. Haley turned out to be a tall, dark-haired woman with attentive brown eyes. She brought her laptop and a folder of documents with her and smelled of something citrusy. She looked a little out of place in their small living room, too bright, too energetic for this cozy space with knitted blankets and old photographs on the walls. Nathan spread the blueprints on the coffee table, and they leaned over them. He explained the layout of the new apartments. She quickly made notes in her notebook. Evelyn was getting ready to leave for her parents' house, listening to their conversation out of the corner of her ear, something about target audiences, price segments, and marketing strategy. "Why don't you stay?" Nathan asked as she stood in the doorway. "Haley has some interesting ideas." "Mom's waiting." Evelyn smiled, buttoning her coat. "Say hi," he said, already bent over the drawings again. Haley was showing him something on her laptop, her perfume smelling of the same fresh citrus. The next week, Haley came back, this time with a finished presentation. Evelyn checked her notebooks in the kitchen, listening to their lively conversation. Haley spoke confidently and knowledgeably about market analysis, neighborhood infrastructure, and development prospects. She had a pleasant voice with a slight huskiness. "She's an amazing professional," Nathan said that evening. "Do you know how many apartments she sold last year?" Now he often mentioned Haley in conversation. She suggested changing the layout of the two-bedroom apartments. She found an excellent designer for the hallways. She arranged a meeting with investors. Evelyn nodded, arranging spices in alphabetical order: ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg. The familiar routine helped her not to think about how her husband's eyes lit up when he talked about work. About Haley, work meetings became more frequent: presentations for clients, site inspections, meetings with designers. Nathan stayed late more and more often. If Evelyn asked him how his day was, he would reply briefly, "Fine, tired," and bury himself in his phone. One evening, she went into his office to bring him some clean shirts. On the table lay a forgotten advertising brochure, glossy paper, beautiful photos of apartments. "Exclusive real estate agent, Haley Burke," read the caption under the photo. In the picture, Haley was smiling, her head tilted slightly to one side. Her lipstick was a little darker than usual. Her hair was pulled back into a casual bun. They were planning to go out of town for the weekend. It was especially beautiful there in the fall, with golden leaves and clear air. It was a tradition that had started during their first fall together. But on Friday evening, Nathan said he had to meet with potential buyers. On Saturday? "They're busy. They can only come on the weekend. Haley says we can't let clients like that get away." Evelyn went to her parents' house alone. Her mother asked her about Nathan, his work, his new project. She talked about apartments, floor plans, rising real estate prices. She didn't mention Haley. No point in worrying her parents. Besides, there wasn't much to say. Just a regular real estate agent doing her job. On Monday morning on her way to school, she saw them together. Nathan and Haley were leaving a coffee shop, talking animatedly about something. Just a regular work meeting over coffee. Nothing special, except that Nathan never liked morning meetings. He said his brain wasn't fully awake yet. That evening, while checking her pockets before doing the laundry, she found a receipt from that same coffee shop: 2 cappuccinos and a blueberry muffin. Nathan didn't like blueberry muffins. He always chose chocolate. Evelyn carefully folded the receipt and put it in her desk drawer, where she kept old postcards and movie tickets. Pedantry and attention to detail are qualities that come in handy, not only at school. The next day, she stayed late in the teacher's room, checking tests and preparing a report for the faculty meeting. Her phone was silent, no calls or messages from her husband. He used to always ask what time she would be home and offer to pick her up. Now he just wrote, "I'll be late," or didn't write at all. The house smelled of unfamiliar perfumes, a light citrus scent. On the kitchen table was a stack of documents, on top of which was a glossy booklet with a smiling Haley. Just another work meeting, nothing more. Just business, just work. Evelyn gathered the documents and neatly stacked them on the edge of the table. She sat down to check the notebooks. The familiar task helped her not to think about how her husband's scent had changed. Now he smelled like citrus, too. The air conditioner in the staff room wasn't working again. The approaching winter had no effect on the temperature in the room. Evelyn sat at her desk, sorting through her students' drawings. Next week was Thanksgiving, and the second graders were making holiday cards for their parents. Jimmy's drawing stood out from the rest: dark colors, sharp lines. The boy had drawn a turkey that was almost black, as if it had been burned. On the back, in uneven handwriting, he had written, "I hate holidays." Evelyn set the drawing aside, making a mental note to talk to the school psychologist. Mrs. Birch from third grade stopped at her desk and handed her a cup of coffee. The wrinkles around her eyes betrayed her fatigue, but her smile remained kind. "I thought you might need this. It's your turn to be on duty in the cafeteria today." Evelyn nodded gratefully. Lately, she had often stayed for extra duty. No one was waiting for her at home anyway. Nathan now came home late, ate dinner quickly, and sat down at his laptop. If she tried to talk to him, he would nod distractedly, his eyes glued to the screen. The cafeteria smelled of corn soup and burnt toast. Second graders were noisily discussing their upcoming vacations, waving sandwiches around. Out of the corner of her eye, Evelyn noticed Jimmy pushing his untouched lunch away. The boy had lost weight over the last month and dark circles had formed under his eyes, just like hers. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from Nathan. "Investor meeting. Will be very late." He used to call, give her details, ask how she was doing. Now it was just short messages, businesslike, emotionless, like reports to his boss. "Mrs. Lewis," Sarah from 2nd B tugged at her sleeve. "Is it true that turkeys grant wishes on Thanksgiving?" "It's Christmas turkeys that grant wishes," Mike corrected her. "On Thanksgiving, they're just delicious." Evelyn smiled, remembering her first Thanksgiving with Nathan. They had just gotten married and were broke. The turkey was burnt, the cranberry sauce didn't thicken, but they laughed at every mishap. He called her his clumsy housewife and promised to love her even if she never learned to cook. When she got home, the first thing she did was check the computer. She logged into her husband's email, knowing his password. Password incorrect. Nathan had never changed his passwords before, saying that there should be no secrets between spouses. Everything in their home had always been shared, from toothpaste to bank cards. On the desk in his study were documents, estimates, blueprints, advertising brochures. A glossy photo of Haley smiled from every page. Real estate agent of the year, record sales, personalized service for every client. On the back of one of the brochures, someone had written in large letters, "Let's discuss this over dinner?" That evening, Jimmy's mother called. Her voice sounded tired and she could hear the TV in the background. She was going through a divorce and moving, and her son was having a hard time coping with the changes. Evelyn listened, making notes in her notebook. Talk to a psychologist, adjust his workload, be more attentive to the boy's mood. Nathan returned after midnight. He smelled of alcohol and someone else's cologne. Not strongly, just barely, but she remembered that citrus scent all too well. In the shower, he hummed an unfamiliar tune. He had never sung before, saying that he was tone deaf. In the morning, he left his phone in the kitchen, forgetting it in his rush to get to a meeting. The screen flashed with a new message, but she couldn't unlock it. Password protected. They used to laugh at couples who hid their phones from each other. "The surest sign of cheating," Nathan used to say. Now, his own phone was password protected, and his jacket pocket was full of receipts from unfamiliar restaurants. At school, it was the usual hustle and bustle, a test in 3rd grade, rehearsal for the holiday concert, a meeting with the head teacher. Jimmy came to school today in a wrinkled shirt and without his homework. Evelyn sat him down at the first desk and discreetly slipped him a sandwich from her lunch. The boy was left without lunch again. In the evening, she sat at the table for a long time checking notebooks. A red pen left notes in the margins. Repeat the rule. Correct mistakes. Pay attention to handwriting. The familiar work helped her not to think about the smell of someone else's perfume, new passwords, unfamiliar melodies in the shower. She marked the days of Nathan's work meetings on the calendar. They had become more frequent over the last month. He used to bring documents home, discuss projects with her, and ask for her opinion. Now all the important papers were kept at the office, and conversations about work had become general and vague. Before going to bed, Evelyn took out an old photo album, their first year together. Nathan smiled at the camera, hugging her shoulders. Young, in love, open. Now he doesn't like having his picture taken, saying he doesn't want to waste time on nonsense. There were no more photos of them together on his phone, only work photos of buildings, and selfies of Haley in front of new apartments. The shared computer was in Nathan's office, old but reliable, with a large monitor. Evelyn used it to print lesson plans and reports, and Nathan kept his work documents there. That evening she was looking for an old file with last year's Christmas play script. There were only 2 weeks left before the holiday, and she had no new ideas. Unfamiliar folders appeared on the desktop. West Hills Project, estimates, booklets. Nathan had always given his files simple names like work or documents. Evelyn opened the search bar and typed script. The computer paused, searching through the files. A mail window popped up in the corner of the screen. Nathan had forgotten to log out. Where their shared password used to be, there were now asterisks. But the emails were still open. Dozens of messages from Haley, a chain of correspondence stretching back several months. At first, everything looked innocent. Discussions about floor plans, meetings with contractors, apartment viewings. Then the tone became more personal. Haley shared her impressions of a new movie. Nathan told funny stories from the construction site. Emojis, jokes, hints. In one of the messages, Nathan complained about a family dinner at Evelyn's parents' house. Boring and predictable, as always. Haley replied that he deserved better than this provincial life. Attached were photos. At first, they were decent. Nathan in front of a house under construction, Haley showing an apartment to clients. Then they became more personal. Evelyn closed the last photo without waiting for it to finish loading. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking over the keyboard. She took a deep breath and opened the next letter. Haley wrote about some restaurant where no one would recognize them. Nathan agreed and suggested a time to meet. The photos became more and more revealing. Nathan was in the shower, water dripping from his shoulders, a towel around his hips. Haley was in her office wearing a short skirt and an unbuttoned blouse. They exchanged photos like teenagers, each one bolder and more personal than the last. Evelyn methodically opened letter after letter, folder after folder. Her pedantry, which her husband had always teased her about, now helped her keep her composure. She didn't miss a single message, saving the important parts to a flash drive. The last letter had arrived that morning. Haley had sent another selfie and written about a surprise for Christmas. Nathan replied with a photo of himself lying in their bedroom in their bed. The caption hinted at an evening rendezvous. The front door slammed shut. Nathan was home earlier than usual. Evelyn quickly closed her email and opened the file with the script. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing safe text about snowflakes and reindeer. The tab with the unfinished letter remained on the screen. She minimized it but didn't close it. "I'm home early," Nathan said, glancing into the study as he unbuttoned his jacket. "I'm writing a script for the morning show." Her voice sounded even, familiar, as if she hadn't just seen his half-naked photos sent to another woman. He walked over to the table and put his hand on her shoulder, a familiar gesture, but now she knew that those same hands had hugged Haley, photographed her, and typed obscene comments on her pictures. He smelled of a familiar citrus scent. "Don't stay up too late." He kissed her on the top of her head and left. Evelyn waited until his footsteps faded away, then opened her email again. She methodically copied the remaining letters and checked her saved files. She closed everything and cleared her history. Her hands weren't shaking. Only the blood was pounding in her temples, and her fingers left wet marks on the keyboard. In the bedroom, Nathan was already asleep, or pretending to be asleep. His phone quietly buzzed with a new message. The screen flashed and went dark. Surely another photo from Haley, another hint of a meeting, another promise of a surprise. Evelyn lay down in bed, the very same bed where her husband had been photographed for his mistress. She closed her eyes, remembering the contents of the letters. She needed to think everything through carefully, sort it all out. After all, pedantry and attention to detail were useful not only at school. The unfinished script for the Christmas play was left on the desk in the office. The file with last year's version was nowhere to be found, but something more important was found instead. Digital traces don't disappear without a trace, especially if you know where to look. The idea for a school trip came up unexpectedly. Mrs. Birch had come down with the flu, and the principal asked Evelyn to replace her as chaperone. 2 weeks in Washington with a class of third graders wasn't the most appealing prospect, but she couldn't refuse. Nathan took the news with ill-concealed enthusiasm. He brought her a suitcase with a shelf, even offered to help pack her things. He used to hate all the fuss of getting ready to go somewhere. Evelyn methodically folded clothes while he sat on the edge of the bed and talked about a new project that required his full attention. In the evenings, while her husband was late at work, she carefully studied the saved correspondence. The one time Nathan forgot to log out of his email, she managed to copy enough material. His manner of communication, characteristic turns of phrase, favorite words. He always started his messages with a greeting, often used abbreviations and business jargon. Creating a similar address was not difficult. All she had to do was add an underscore between the first and last names. In the settings, she set the same sender name and uploaded his photo from social media. There was no noticeable difference. She sent the first test email to technical support, just to check how the email looked in someone else's inbox. The message arrived with the correct name and the same signature that Nathan used. The support service replied without suspecting anything. Evelyn spent the next 2 days studying the business emails she had managed to save. She copied entire phrases, memorized how he said goodbye to different people, and noted which emojis he used in informal communication. During breaks at school, she reread the saved messages, noting stylistic features. Her suitcase gradually filled with things: warm sweaters, comfortable shoes for long excursions, an umbrella in case of rain. Nathan hung around, offering to lend her his old tablet so she wouldn't be bored in the evenings. His voice betrayed his poorly concealed joy at the impending separation. At work, Evelyn checked the lists of children, collected permission slips from parents, and discussed the itinerary with her colleagues. At the same time, she sent test emails from a fake address, short business messages to various support services. Everyone responded as usual, mistaking her for Nathan. In the evening before leaving, she did one more check. She sent a request to a free email service. A standard reply came back. The system worked flawlessly. The emails from the fake address looked like the real thing. At the last minute, Nathan offered to drive her to the school where the bus with the children was leaving from. All the way there, he whistled a tune and tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. He even helped carry her suitcase and wished her a good trip with such enthusiasm that it seemed almost comical. The bus pulled away, carrying Evelyn and 24 excited third graders toward Washington. She waved to her husband through the window, noticing him hurriedly taking out his phone. Haley must be texting him that the coast was clear. In her bag was a laptop with her email set up, a flash drive with compromising information, and a notebook with notes on Nathan's mannerisms. On her phone was an app that allowed her to track the time messages were sent. Everything was ready for the next stage. Her phone vibrated, a message from her husband. "Have a good trip. Don't miss me." Evelyn smiled as she looked at the road ahead. She definitely wouldn't miss him. She had plenty to keep her busy for the next 2 weeks. The trip had ended a day early. A storm warning had been issued in Washington, and the school administration had decided to err on the side of caution. Evelyn hadn't bothered to tell her husband. The taxi pulled up outside their house in the middle of the day, when Nathan was usually at work. There was a whole stack of envelopes in the mailbox. Evelyn sorted through them as she climbed the steps to the porch. Bills, advertisements, a letter from the bank. The last envelope stood out with its thick, embossed paper. Brown and Partners, Notary's Public. The house smelled of unfamiliar perfume and coffee. There were 2 cups on the kitchen table, one with lipstick marks on the rim. Evelyn put her suitcase in the hall and went into her husband's study. It was unusually messy, with papers, folders, and documents scattered everywhere. On top of the desk was a draft contract for the transfer of ownership of their house. She slowly sank into a chair, poring over the legal wording. In the new owner column was the name of a real estate company. At the bottom was Nathan's sweeping signature and a note saying spouse's signature required. Next to the contract was a letter from a notary office inviting them to sign the deal in 4 days. In the desk drawer, she found advertising brochures with the real estate agency's logo and a familiar name, Haley Burke, leading realtor. The office felt stuffy. Evelyn opened the window, letting in the fresh autumn air. She sat back down in the chair and spread the documents she had found out in front of her. She just stared at them, not trying to do anything. After all, she was an elementary school teacher, used to doing everything in order, without rushing. Evelyn turned on her laptop at exactly 6 in the morning, an early rising habit developed over years of teaching, which now came in handy. At that time, Nathan's boss, Mr. Clark, was usually checking his email before his morning run. She chose the first photo, revealing enough to cause shock, but not so personal that the letter would be deleted immediately. Nathan was in the shower, smiling at the camera. The photo was clearly intended for Haley. Evelyn logged into his email from a fake account, carefully copying her husband's business style, greeting, name, characteristic turns of phrase. "Good morning, Victor. I wanted to discuss the new project. What poses do you prefer? I mean, positions for the project. I've attached a visualization, for example." Her fingers fluttered over the keyboard, without trembling, without hesitation. The morning sun illuminated the table where the second graders' notebooks lay. Evelyn took a sip of her cold coffee and waited for the confirmation that the email had been sent. She meticulously checked the Sent folder. Half an hour later, the first reply arrived. A short, "What the hell is this?" She methodically sent a second email, this time with a different photo. Again, the tone was businesslike with ambiguous hints. "Regarding yesterday's meeting, how do you like this angle for the presentation?" By lunchtime, she had sent 3 more emails, each with a new photo and carefully crafted text. The last one contained a particularly racy photo and the caption, "I hope you like it. I'm willing to show you more in person." The replies became increasingly harsh. Mr. Clark was clearly losing patience, threatening an investigation, demanding explanations, promising to call security. Evelyn calmly checked her notebook, glancing occasionally at the screen. She had 7 photos left, just enough for the evening mailing. At 4 o'clock, she sent out a new batch of emails, this time to the entire company management. The same photos, the same ambiguous captions. Imitating Nathan's style, she added work details, discussions of projects, references to meetings, business matters. It all looked like a clumsy attempt at flirting by an employee who had lost control. The letter to the CFO was particularly successful. A photo of Nathan in an unambiguous pose was accompanied by text about the quarterly report. "I hope these figures impress you. I can provide more detailed figures in a one-on-one meeting." By evening, Nathan's phone was ringing off the hook. She could hear him trying to explain himself, talking about his email being hacked and a misunderstanding. But the photos were real, and the signature on the emails was his. Evelyn methodically sent the latest photos, saving copies of all the emails. When the last photo had been sent to all the addresses in the corporate mailing list, she carefully deleted the fake account. She stacked her notebooks in a pile. Tomorrow was a test in second grade, and she needed to prepare answers. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. It was time for her usual evening tea. Nathan burst into the house, pale with beads of sweat on his forehead. He was shaking, his tie askew. Evelyn calmly stirred her tea, listening as he frantically tried to call the company's security service. His voice sounded panicked. It seemed that Mr. Clark had said something about an internal investigation and the police. She took her favorite cup out of the cupboard and added a spoonful of sugar. It had been a productive day. All the letters had been sent, the notebooks had been checked, and the lesson plan for tomorrow had been prepared. Pedantry and attention to detail were qualities that came in handy, not only at school. The office greeted Nathan with an unusual silence. The usually noisy open space fell silent as soon as he entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, and everyone stared at their monitors. Only Sarah, Mr. Clark's secretary, tapped away at her keyboard as usual, trying hard to pretend that nothing was happening. The first call was from the chairman of the housing cooperative. His shrill voice sounded almost malicious over the phone. "You know, Mr. Lewis, in light of recent events, we are forced to reconsider the terms of the contract. Reputational risks." A corporate email window flashed on the computer screen. 43 unread emails from clients, contractors, colleagues. Some of them contained the very same photos, with mocking comments. "Nathan, come see me." Mr. Clark's voice sounded dry over the intercom. It was the first time in 5 years that he had addressed Nathan by his last name. In the reception area, Sarah demonstratively adjusted her blouse collar and pursed her lips. The boss's office smelled of coffee and expensive perfume. Mr. Clark stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. On the desk in front of him lay a printout of those very emails. Nathan recognized his photos. "Have a seat," Clark said without turning around, continuing to look out the window. A guy from the IT department flashed by in the hallway carrying an external hard drive. That meant they had started copying data from his work computer. Nathan wiped his sweaty palms on his pants and opened his mouth to explain. But Clark raised his hand to stop him. "Don't bother. Security has already started an investigation. Your access to the projects has been temporarily blocked until we find out." In the parking lot, Nathan couldn't get the key into the ignition for a long time. His hands were shaking. His phone was ringing off the hook. "Suspended from duty," Greg from legal wrote. "Transferring cases to Thompson," his deputy reported. "Meeting canceled," his calendar notified him. The rear-view mirror reflected the window of Haley's office. An empty chair, a monitor turned off. Her assistant, nervously fingering her beads, said that Miss Burke would not be coming in today, or tomorrow, or next week. Family circumstances, you know. Nathan arrived home in the middle of the day, for the first time in many years. A children's cartoon was playing on TV, and there was a cup of half-drunk tea on the kitchen table. Evelyn must have stopped by for lunch. The computer screen in his office was flashing, demanding a password change. The corporate system had blocked access. He sat in the dark, listening to the clock ticking. Fragments of phrases ran through his head. Internal investigation, ethical violation, incompatible with the position. Haley wasn't answering her phone. Her photo had disappeared from the Our Employees section of the real estate agency's website. Evelyn returned in the evening as usual with a bag full of notebooks. She went into the kitchen and turned on the kettle. Her face showed no surprise or question, as if her husband always sat at home in the middle of the workday. "I'll make dinner," Nathan said into the void. She nodded without looking up from her notebooks. The next morning, his pass didn't work at the office entrance. The security guard pretended he'd never seen him before. "Sorry," Management says no one in without approval. His phone rang in the car. It was Haley's number. But an unfamiliar voice answered. "Good afternoon, real estate agency. How can we help you?" So she changed her number. She didn't even say goodbye. In the evening, a letter arrived from Greg, a long one, full of legal terms. Taking into account, in connection with newly discovered circumstances, we are forced to terminate. At the end was a dry signature and the note sent from iPhone. Nathan stared at the screen until the letters began to blur. In the next room, Evelyn was checking tests. The red pen scratched across the paper, as if counting the blows to his crumbling career. Haley sat in a cafe across the street from the real estate agency, nervously stirring her cold coffee. Her phone had been silent for 3 days. She had to change her number after the photos were circulated throughout the company. The waitress brought the bill, but Haley barely noticed her. Another email was waiting on her laptop screen, this time from the agency's management. Due to a possible conflict of interest, another polite rejection, another closed door. Something was wrong with Nathan's email. These letters, these photos. She remembered other versions of the pictures, with different captions. But she couldn't prove anything. All the originals were on her old phone, which she had thrown away on the first day of the scandal. The phone on the table came to life. An unknown number. Haley hesitated but answered. Nathan's voice came through the phone. "We need to talk. Something's not right here." She hung up and blocked the number. Coffee grounds settled at the bottom of her cup, dark and thick, just like the mess she had gotten herself into through her own stupidity. The office was filled with a heavy atmosphere. Her co-workers avoided her gaze and her bosses called her into their offices. Everyone avoided her desk as if it were contaminated. A new email appeared in her inbox, this time from an unknown address. It was a very revealing photo of Nathan with a mocking caption. Behind the glass partition, she caught a glimpse of her department head. He was frowning as he looked through some papers, probably another memo about her inappropriate behavior. On the table lay a fresh printout, the same photo that had already been sent to all of the company's partners. Haley closed her laptop and gathered her things. Her car stood alone in the parking lot. Everyone else had already gone home. The office windows were reflected in the rearview mirror. Up there, her career was falling apart. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Mr. Clark. Haley took a deep breath and answered. Her boss's voice sounded tired. "Come in first thing tomorrow morning, and bring a letter of resignation. It'll be better for everyone if it's voluntary." At home, she opened her email, a new letter, this time sent to the entire company. It was Nathan again, with another indecent photo. The caption hit her like a punch in the gut. "This is what I think of your company." Below was a long list of recipients, including all of the important clients. Her eyes lingered on the send dates. Something didn't add up. At that time, Nathan was with her. They were having dinner at a restaurant. He couldn't have sent that email. But then who? The doorbell rang. A courier had delivered a notice of termination of contract. Haley signed for it, mechanically noting the tremor in her fingers. Inside the envelope was a document, a dry official text about the termination of cooperation. She took out her phone and opened the photos. Those same pictures. There was something strange about how they appeared. It was as if someone was pulling the strings, systematically destroying them both. But who? A vague guess flashed through her mind. The quiet teacher, the pedantic wife. The one who had always been in the shadows always remained invisible. Haley shook her head, dismissing the thought. It couldn't be, or could it? A new email dropped into her inbox. Another photo, another blow. Now it was sent to all of their partners, all of their contractors. It was as if someone was methodically destroying their reputation, leaving no chance for recovery. Haley closed her laptop and walked over to the window. The city lights flickered in the darkness, indifferent and distant. Somewhere out there, in a small house on the outskirts, sat the woman whose life they wanted to destroy. Now she understood. They had greatly underestimated Evelyn Lewis. Her head was buzzing after a sleepless night. Nathan sat in the kitchen staring blankly at his cold coffee. On the table lay his phone, another message from his former boss, with a screenshot attached. The same photo he had sent only to Haley was now circulating among all his business contacts. Outside, it was a gloomy morning. Evelyn was getting ready for school. The familiar sounds of her morning routine came from the bathroom. The sound of running water, a toothbrush clicking against a glass, the quiet jingle of a hairbrush. He listened to these sounds, trying to catch something new, something that would reveal her involvement. The thought came to him suddenly. He remembered the evening when he forgot to check the mail. Evelyn had sat at the computer late, pretending to prepare for class. And then there was that strange trip, her sudden departure. And right after that, the first letters with photos. She came down to the kitchen in her usual beige cardigan, carrying a bag full of notebooks. With a familiar movement, she turned on the kettle and took out a cup. Nathan looked at her hands, confident, calm, the hands of someone who knows exactly what they are doing. "It's you," he didn't ask. He just stated the fact. Evelyn put the cup on the table. Her face showed neither surprise nor fear, just a slight tiredness, like after a long day at work. "Why did you decide to redecorate the house?" She sat down opposite him, carefully smoothing out the napkin. Nathan opened his mouth, about to lie about investments and business partnerships. But under her direct gaze, the words stuck in his throat. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed tea and morning dampness. "I thought Haley and I were planning to sell the house while I'm away? Start a new life?" On the table lay the documents from the notary's office, the very ones he had hidden in his study. Evelyn folded them into a neat stack and smoothed out the corners. "You know, I just wanted to look at an old script on the computer, but I found your correspondence. All these photos, all these plans." There was no anger or resentment in her voice, just a calm statement of facts, like in a math class. Nathan remembered how she methodically checked his notebooks, writing grades in red pen. She had destroyed his career just as methodically. "You destroyed everything I've built over the years, and you were going to destroy everything we built together." A school bus drove by outside the window, a yellow spot in the gray morning fog. Evelyn looked at her watch and finished her tea. Her movements remained as measured as ever. "I'm late for class," she said, standing up and adjusting her cardigan. Nathan watched her gather her bag, notebooks, pens, a math textbook. Everything was as usual, as if she hadn't just confessed to methodically destroying his reputation. "And now what?" "Now you'll sign a waiver of claim to the house. It will remain mine, as compensation for moral damages. The documents are on the table." The door slammed in the hallway. Evelyn had left for work, leaving him alone with his cold coffee and a pile of papers. Nathan stared at his signature on the transfer agreement, now useless. His quiet, inconspicuous wife had turned out to be much more resourceful than he had thought. His phone vibrated in his pocket, another message about the aftermath of the scandal. He didn't even bother to open it. Evelyn's empty cup stood on the kitchen table, the only evidence of their morning conversation, the conversation that had finally dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. The letter of dismissal arrived on Monday morning. Dry wording, paragraphs from his employment contract, a standard form with a stamp. Nathan sat in his home office, rereading the document over and over again. His phone screen had long since gone blank. After the 10th call from Haley, he simply turned it off. A stack of envelopes with bank logos had accumulated in the mailbox, reminders of overdue payments. A car loan, a mortgage for an apartment under construction in Lakeview, a consumer loan for the bracelet he had given Haley for her birthday. Previously, all bills had been paid automatically from his salary card. The front door slammed. Evelyn was back from school. She had a short day on Tuesdays. Nathan heard her unpack her bag, put the kettle on, and rustle through her notebooks. The usual sounds of an ordinary day, only now they echoed in his temples with a dull ache. Through the window he could see a delivery van pull up to the house across the street. The courier was unloading boxes. The Thompsons were renovating. They used to consult Nathan on all their construction projects, but now they didn't even say hello when they saw him. The phone on the table rang, a call from an unknown number. Nathan answered, hoping deep down to hear Haley's voice, but it was the real estate agent from her agency. Regarding your reservation at Lakeview, unfortunately, we have to cancel the contract. A new email appeared in his inbox, from Haley, the first in a week. It was short and businesslike. Please do not try to contact me anymore. The situation is unpleasant for everyone. At the bottom was an automatic signature with new contact details. She had found a new agency, probably in the city she had moved to after the scandal. There was a clatter in the kitchen. Evelyn was cooking lunch. The smell of fried onions and garlic filled the house, even reaching his study. He used to love these homey smells, but now they only caused a dull irritation. The doorbell rang. The courier had brought documents from the bank. A demand for early repayment of the loan, something about a breach of contract. Nathan threw the envelope on the table without even opening it. What difference did it make now? An old photograph fell out of the dresser. He was on a construction site, smiling at the camera, with an unfinished house behind him. It was the first major project he had been entrusted with. He had had so many plans, so many hopes. Now even small contractors wouldn't hire him. His reputation was ruined, his name tarnished. There was a knock at the office door. Evelyn brought lunch on a tray. She put it on the table and took away the empty coffee cup. He looked at her hands, the very ones that had typed the letters that destroyed his career. The calm, confident movements of a person who knows exactly what she wants. By evening, another letter arrived from Haley, the last one. She wrote about her new job, about another city, about how important it was to start with a clean slate. I hope you understand. It's better if we don't talk anymore. Business-like tone, no emotion. It was as if those months, those meetings, those plans for the future had never happened. Printouts from job search sites lay on the table. Dozens of resumes sent out, not a single response. His name had become toxic. No one wanted to have anything to do with a man who had become famous for indecent photos and scandalous letters. The door slammed again in the hallway. Evelyn had left for a parent-teacher conference. Nathan was left alone in the empty house, alone with rejection letters, demands from banks, and a silent phone. Somewhere in another city, Haley was starting a new life, while he was stuck here, at the bottom of his failure. The high ceilings emphasized the echoing emptiness of the court hallway. Nathan sat on a wooden bench, staring at the cracks in the tile floor. Every step echoed. Lawyers with briefcases hurried about their business. Clerks bustled with folders. Visitors shifted their feet at the office doors. Greg from his former company, now Evelyn's lawyer, loomed outside the judge's office. He was making notes in his notebook, squinting at the documents. When he saw Nathan, he twitched the corner of his mouth but didn't say hello. "Mr. Lewis?" The secretary peeked out of the office. The office was smaller than it had appeared behind the massive door. The judge, a heavy-set woman with glasses, was looking through papers spread out on the desk. Evelyn sat by the window, straight and calm, as if she were at a parent-teacher conference. She was wearing the same beige cardigan she had worn on the day they first met. "Divorce petition, division of property." The judge leafed through the documents. "Any objections to the wife's sole right to the house?" Nathan shook his head. What was the point of objecting? Everything had already been decided. He signed where Greg had indicated. The letters blurred before his eyes. In the hallway, he was intercepted by Steve from the construction crew, who had apparently come for something else. He glanced at his rumpled suit and sunken eyes. Ever thought about a career as a photographer, Nathan? You know, nude photography. You're great at taking pictures of dicks. Nathan washed his face for a long time in the bathroom. The mirror reflected a strange face, unshaven, with red eyes. Behind the wall, someone was discussing his story. The voices echoed through the tiled room. Such photos for the boss. He's completely lost it. Now he'll end up a porter. In the parking lot, he ran into Sarah, Mr. Clark's former secretary. She turned away demonstratively, rummaging in her purse. Then she suddenly turned around and called out, "You know, I always thought you were smart, and you even got that idiot Haley involved. She's in Phoenix now, working as a waitress. Are you happy?" His old pickup truck was parked at the curb, the only thing left after the division of property. Construction gloves and a crumpled work jacket lay in the passenger seat. He didn't get behind the wheel but wandered down the street looking at shop windows. One reflected the sign of his former company, brand new and shiny. Instead of his name, Thompson was now listed as the CEO. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another job rejection. "Unfortunately, your application. At this time, we wish you luck in your search." He didn't even bother to read them. The news was playing in a diner on the corner. The announcer was talking about some scandal at a large company. Someone there had also sent indecent photos to their bosses. The bartender stopped wiping the bar and stared at Nathan. "Hey, buddy, I know you. You're the one—" At the supermarket, the cashier stared at his credit card for a long time, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, it's declined. Can you pay cash?" He had no cash. His last money had gone to pay his lawyer. His rented room greeted him with silence. A narrow bed, a table by the window overlooking the brick wall of the neighboring house. Another resume lit up on his laptop screen. Maybe he'd get lucky here. Although who needs a foreman with a reputation as a pervert? A letter from the real estate agent appeared in his inbox. Someone had bought the apartment he and Haley had reserved in Lakeview. At the bottom was a note saying that the penalty for terminating the contract would be charged to his card, the same card that had been declined at the supermarket. Rain was drizzling outside the window. A wet sparrow on the windowsill looked at Nathan with a black eye and flew away. A door slammed in the hallway. The neighbors were back from work. An ordinary evening on an ordinary day. Only now it was someone else's life, where he no longer belonged. Evelyn rearranged the furniture in the living room. Now the sofa stood by the window, and the armchair took the place of Nathan's toolbox. She covered the empty walls where his diplomas and certificates had hung with new bookshelves. The old photographs were packed into a box and sent to the attic. The house seemed to be shedding its skin, renewing itself. Her husband's former study was now her work corner. The desk was turned toward the window, and a corkboard with children's drawings appeared on the wall. She threw out her computer and bought a new laptop, thin and light. The mailbox on the porch was replaced with a new sign that now read, E. Lewis. The neighbors pretended not to notice the changes. Only Mrs. Thompson sometimes glanced over the fence, shaking her head. At the school meeting, she sat in the front row for the first time, closer to the center. Jonathan Miller, the father of twins in her class, waved to her. After the meeting, he stayed behind and offered her a ride. His light-colored sedan was clearly superior to the beat-up school bus. On the way, they talked about the children, school, and the weather. Jonathan turned out to be a good listener. He nodded in all the right places and asked the right questions. When he smiled, wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes. At home, Evelyn took an old photo out of the closet, their graduating class 10 years ago. She stood in the center, confident in her calling. Back then, being a teacher seemed like the most important thing in the world. Then Nathan came along, and everything changed. And now, she felt like that girl in the photo again. Jonathan called 3 days later just to ask how she was doing. Then he called again to offer her tickets to the theater. His twins were sick, and the tickets would go to waste. She agreed, surprising herself. The theater was showing a classic, Funny Money. Jonathan commented on what was happening on stage, sometimes leaning toward her ear. He exuded the calmness of a man confident in himself and his place in the world. After the show, they went to a cafe. He talked about his work, something related to the publishing business. Evelyn listened, noting how differently one could talk about business, without self-admiration, without wanting to impress. At her house, he got out to open the car door for her, a simple gesture, but so unusual. Nathan never bothered with such trifles. Jonathan walked her to the porch and thanked her for the evening. He didn't try to invite himself in for coffee or make any ambiguous hints. There were no traces of her former life left in the house. New curtains, new cushions on the sofa, new cups in the cupboard. Evelyn ran her hand along the wall. It was time to change the wallpaper, maybe choose something lighter. The next day at school, the Miller twins brought her a homemade card. Clumsy letters spelled out, "Thank you for Dad." She hid the card in her diary with a smile. Children always sense everything. Jonathan now called every evening to talk about work and ask about her day. Sometimes they walked in the park, fed the ducks, and talked about everything under the sun. He didn't rush things, didn't pressure her, just was there for her. On the weekend, she started renovating the hallway. She stripped the old wallpaper and threw out the coat rack that Nathan had once knocked together out of boards. Jonathan arrived with his tools and rolled up his sleeves. By evening, the walls were ready for painting and they were both covered in whitewash. The house was changing along with her, becoming brighter, more spacious, more comfortable. The old photographs remained in the attic, but new ones appeared. Her class on a field trip, the Miller twins at the blackboard, the autumn park where she and Jonathan used to walk. The neighbors gradually got used to seeing the light-colored sedan outside her house. Mrs. Thompson stopped shaking her head and now greeted her cheerfully over the fence. Life was entering a new phase, without drama, without stress, without trying to live up to other people's expectations. A new coffee machine was installed in the teacher's lounge. Evelyn no longer drank tea. She had discovered the taste of cappuccino. Small changes added up to big ones, creating a new reality day by day. Her reality where she alone decided how to live her life. The supermarket on the corner of Maple Street was being remodeled. They were expanding the parking lot and adding a new wing. Evelyn noticed a familiar figure among the workers. Nathan, in an orange vest, was carrying bags of cement. She didn't slow down, just noticed how his shoulders were slumped and his temples had turned gray. Jonathan was waiting for her in a cafe across the street. He kissed her on the cheek and pulled out her chair. In 2 months, she had grown accustomed to these simple gestures of affection. He told her about his new publishing contract, the twins' success at school, and his plans for the weekend. Through the window, she could see the construction site where workers were bustling about and trucks were coming and going. Nathan appeared in her field of vision, disappeared, then reappeared. He was carrying boards, sawing something, wiping sweat from his forehead. He used to command such hard workers, but now he had become one of them. "Are you okay?" Jonathan covered her hand with his. She nodded and smiled. She told him about her new project with the third graders. They were putting on a play for Christmas. He listened attentively, as only he could, with his whole being, without being distracted by his phone or other thoughts. In the evening, they went to the movies, some romantic comedy, light and unpretentious. In the darkness of the theater, Jonathan held her hand, occasionally stroking her wrist with his thumb. His touch sent shivers down her skin. After the movie, He drove her home. He paused at the porch as if deciding something. Then he took a small box out of the glove compartment. A simple silver bracelet, nothing fancy. He fastened it on her wrist and kissed her palm. "I was thinking, maybe we could have dinner on Saturday. At my place? The twins will be at their grandmother's." There was uncertainty in his voice. He always gave her the choice, never pressured her. Evelyn looked at the bracelet, at his hand still holding her palm. She nodded. The next day, she drove past the construction site again. Nathan was sitting on an upside-down bucket eating a sandwich. He noticed her car, started to get up, but stayed where he was. Their eyes met for a moment, then parted like the paths of two random passers-by. In the evening, the twins' mother called. The children were thrilled with their new teacher. They hadn't seen their father so happy in a long time. Evelyn listened, fingering the bracelet on her wrist. She would have been embarrassed by such conversations in the past, but now she just smiled. On Saturday, Jonathan met her at the door of his house, a small, cozy place with a swing on the porch. Candles were lit on the table and soft music was playing. He had cooked a simple but loving dinner. There was a piano in his study. It turned out he was a pretty good player. "Stay," he whispered in her ear as the clock struck midnight. She stayed. His touch was gentle, confident, unhurried. He kissed her as if they had all eternity ahead of them. Falling asleep in his arms, Evelyn thought, "This is it. This is real. No games, no masks, no attempts to change each other." In the morning, she took a different route home. She didn't want to drive past the construction site. But at the traffic lights, she saw Nathan anyway. He was loading some boxes into a van, in dirty overalls, unshaven, with a dull look in his eyes, as if he had aged 10 years. The thought flashed through her mind to call and ask how he was, but it immediately melted away. It was no longer her life, no longer her concern. She now had a different path, to a house with a swing on the porch, to a man who knew how to love unconditionally. Jonathan called in the afternoon, just to say he missed her. He invited her to dinner with the twins. They wanted to show her a new magic trick. Evelyn agreed, feeling warmth spread inside her. Life went on, different, new, real. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of the construction site. The workers were still bustling about. Trucks were coming and going. The past was left behind, dissolving into the dust of the roads and the noise of the city. Ahead of her was a house with a swing, 2 boys with magic tricks, and a man who looked at her as if she were the center of his universe. The elementary school auditorium was aglow with festive lights. Evelyn adjusted her dark blue dress, pulling down the lace collar. Her short haircut revealed her neck, a new look she had decided on a month ago. Light makeup, low-heeled shoes, and a silver bracelet on her wrist. A gift from Jonathan. Her third graders were running around the hall, getting tangled up in their fancy suits and dresses. Mary, from the back row, was scattering glitter all over the stage. Tommy was trying to tie his bow tie, and Sarah was rehearsing her speech for the 10th time. A year ago, they were just children. Now each of them had grown up, changed, and blossomed in their own way. The Miller twins, flashing identical smiles, brought her a homemade poster. Clumsy letters spelled out, "Best Mom in the World." Evelyn froze, staring at the words. Jonathan coughed at the door, hiding a smile. "Dad and I spent the whole evening drawing yesterday," Mike announced proudly. "And I stuck on the glitter myself," added Matt. "Actually, it was a surprise," Jonathan said, coming closer and putting his arms around his son's shoulders. The principal gathered the children on stage for the final rehearsal before the ceremony. The first graders were tripping over each other, handing out programs. Parents took their seats in the hall, snapping photos and wiping away tears. "Shall we go? There's still 20 minutes before it starts." Jonathan took her by the hand. They went out into the school garden, apple trees in bloom, benches in the shade of the trees. A year ago, she had been checking notebooks here alone. Now she was walking next to a man whose children called her mom. "You know," Jonathan stopped at an old apple tree, "I've been wanting to ask you something for a long time." Something suspicious was sticking out of his jacket pocket. The twins, peeking out from behind a lilac bush, gave each other a thumbs up. "The boys have given the go-ahead," he smiled, taking out a small velvet box. Children's voices could be heard coming from the open windows of the auditorium. Her class was rehearsing their farewell song. Somewhere out there, beyond the school fence, the city bustled with its usual life. And here, in the silence of the blooming garden, Jonathan got down on one knee. "Will you marry me?" The ring sparkled in the spring sunshine, simple, elegant, without unnecessary pomp. Just like their relationship, real, without games or pretense. The twins couldn't resist and jumped out of their hiding place. "Well, will you?" "Say yes. We've already prepared a room for you, and we've learned how to make breakfast." Evelyn looked at her reflection in the school window, a smiling woman with sparkling eyes, completely unlike the quiet teacher she had been a year ago. She looked at Jonathan, the corners of his eyes crinkled with a smile, at the boys dancing with impatience. The principal looked out into the garden. "Mrs. Lewis, we're starting in 5 minutes." "Actually," Evelyn held out her hand to Jonathan, "it's almost Mrs. Miller." The twins let out a victory cry. Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. In the auditorium, the guests were already taking their seats, and her third graders were waiting for their teacher, older, changed, happy.